Those of you joining us for the very first time, But We're Different is a sales and marketing show for revenue professionals who want to think differently about growing their business and adapt to the not so hidden, but commonly ignored changes happening in the marketplace. Unlike other shows about sales and marketing that chase trends, we only focus on reinforcing the foundational sales and marketing principles that everyone else seems to neglect. So, everything we share with you during these sessions is what we see firsthand from the companies we work with. And my promise to you is this: you will always walk away with actionable takeaways that you can implement immediately. So thank you to everyone for taking your time to join us today. We know you can do anything with this hour, and we are honored that you choose to spend it with us. So let's get started. Well, we all know what it feels like when change is handled poorly. Bad communication seems to make decisions feel arbitrary, and people feel blindsided by abrupt pivots and just overall organizational changes. But we also know what it feels like when you're on the other side of that and you come across something that makes you feel like it can make a really meaningful contribution if only we could do this type of change or get this type of buy-in. And it's how you spread that word that can have a profound effect on how the message is received. Our firsthand instinct as people is to just directly tell people stuff. It's to bombard them with a different point of view. And it makes people on the other side of that conversation feel nothing. Right? We know that convincing people to change the way they think is a very delicate process. And the right message delivered at the wrong time, or even in just the wrong way, is the wrong message. We think about it this way, right? If you realize that change is necessary, they can too, but you didn't come to that conclusion instantly, right? There have been countless steps along the way that have moved you and your thinking. So today, we're going to talk through how we put people on the other side of our conversations in a position of self-discovery so we're more likely to get buy-in and create change that makes a difference. So Will, getting buy-in, creating change, super nebulous. What's a common situation that someone probably finds themselves in that any of this even applies?
Yeah. So Nick, we could take this podcast, I think, two ways. We could go specifically down enacting a company to buy in and change around their sales and marketing principles, or we could be more general of change management across companies and culture questions. Where do you think we should bring this that's going to be most valuable for listeners?
Well, I'd love anyone to put in the chat if they have a preference. But the reason these subjects come up for us is because people want to do a lot of the things that we talk about. And in their circle of influence, it might not be enough to be able to get the type of traction that they need to go real far.
Yeah.
So Kristen says she's interested in culture. So let's weave these two together as we go, because I think the cultural aspect of this is still very, very important. And it plays a really big part in the company-wide change.
Yeah. So our common thread at Impact is we usually have either a CEO or a director of marketing come raise their hand to us and say, hey, I read the Ask You Answer. I think it's a phenomenal book. I think it's extra simple. I think I could get my whole company behind it. And we want to enact these principles. What's the right way for a company like ours to go about doing that? And so this is a common situation for a ton of companies. You have one person that caught a vision that wants to share it with everybody else in the organization. And there is a million ways to go bake that cake. And it's not one meeting. It's not one email. It's 100 little things that have to take place over the coming months for that change management to, first off, be taken in the way that you want it to be taken and be taken seriously, and then be sticky and actually impact lasting change within your company. And so a typical question I ask someone at the beginning of, they ask you answer, I want to change my organization to adopt these principles. I want to take on the culture that they ask you answer is. And again, you can extrapolate this to anything. One of the first questions I ask is, how good is your company at communicating honestly and openly? Because it's usually one of the first like foundational things that has to be strong for your company to have any message get relayed across the entire board. Uh, the second question I ask is how much do people trust your leadership or your leadership team? Because like I said, I've seen a million companies try and change. There's times when this feels like it's this grassroots, like extremely, like almost like altruistic and purpose driven change within a company, and everybody catches the vision. The other way I've seen this go is leadership says it's happening, and so it's happening no matter what, and then it almost becomes like micromanagery or accountability and having KPIs and trying to have like aha moments, catching people not doing the thing that you're trying to ask them to do. And then you have everything in between of those things. So when you're talking about change management within your company or within your team, it's inherently super nebulous and overwhelming. And every company has to go about doing it a different way. And like I shared, I think just through like buy-in of leadership, buy-in of strength and clarity and trust and transparent communication, and then helping everyone understand the why of why we need this change and what it means to everyone at an individual level and what's the cost of it and then what's the upside of it for me at an individual level. Those are all the things that I say is like meeting one of helping a CEO or helping a director of marketing start to create cultural change within their company. And that's for many teams just the start of the conversation for them to do it the right way.
Well, that's the difference between a top-down change and the middle-out. And top-down, like you said, is waterfall. Leadership says, we're going to do this new thing. We're rolling it out. Everyone has the part that they're going to play to change the trajectory or do something differently. The middle-out change is probably the more common thing, because people who are on the ground in sales conversations or doing the marketing or doing the whatever it is that your business is doing, implementing for your business on the support side or service side, those are the people who most likely will be able to identify the need for a change long before leadership ever does. I think Michael asked a question here too. It's about like from the sales perspective. I mean, they're doing a very similar thing. They are working most likely with someone doing a middle out change inside of their company. It's the way a lot of sales processes go. Not every single. It's very infrequent that you'll receive the decision maker, CEO, or whatever top line leader that's going to initiate this charge. Now, those are always the best case scenarios for us as salespeople. But when we're talking about how do we move a company, how do we move a line of thinking, especially when we're talking about service-based offerings, there's so much more that goes into it. And I think one of the places we find a lot of people in, just why it's such a common topic for us at Impact, is that we find a lot of people who want to do a lot of the things that we talk about here, and they get only so far before, hey, you probably shouldn't talk about that, right? They get that pushback. Hey, you probably shouldn't be talking about that. Or you probably, we don't really, that's not the way that we like to sell. That's not really the way that we like to do things. And it makes it really hard. So where do you typically start with a client that is even if they've made the commitment to do it, it's still a huge process to get this through an organization. So where do you even start?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to so you have top down or you have middle out. It looks way different. When you're doing top down change, the messaging, the communication of this work, showing that the leadership team or top down has buy-in to the thing, like they're going to find their own ways to personally invest in the change and walk the walk, not just talk the talk. That's where we start in that path. I talk to a ton of people that are like, I read the book. I just want the Ask You Answers to start getting adopted across my team or across my sales function or on my marketing team. And to those people, I say almost the opposite thing, which is people get annoyed when you talk about what you're going to do. People listen when you talk about what you have done. And so I push those people to just go do the thing, like prove that there is value in changing by you changing yourself first and then sharing the story of what you've made within that change. So to combine these two things together, when we're working with a team to do they ask you answer really well, I think on like the short end with a strong leadership team, you can have an entire 50-person company walking the same walk to the same beat in less than a month's time. And then I've seen teams that are a fifth of that size with poor communication or poor trust in each other, more selfish, more understanding what's in it for me or how can I trust these people. They're on month 6, still trying to get teams to understand why are we doing what we're doing and what does this mean to me at an individual level? How will this save me time? How will this make me money? Trying to get like to the core of people's own intrinsic reasons and still struggling because of a lack of trust of the people that were in the boat in the first place together. So I'm kind of tackling both at once here, but I would say like it's a lot of little things and every company gets started in a slightly different way. But the goal is to create a psychologically open space for a company to talk about that there's change that needs to happen in the first place anyway.
Yeah, I'm drawing a lot of parallels to, I think, to a bunch of different sales conversations I've had over the years where even if you have that top-down approach, there's still so much work that needs to go into getting everyone on board. It might be slightly easier, but there's still a lot. I think it starts with changing the way that people think about the thing that you're doing. What is the wrong way to do it? I think that's probably the easier way. There's so many ways that these like initiatives like have a bunch of false starts.
Symptoms of the wrong way is it's a one-way conversation. Like it's news from the top down that never becomes a dialogue in some way or like any Q&A fashion. It's also probably usually starting with like the what and the how of what's changing and how it's changing and what it means to your job and never the why behind the thing. So I would say if it's one meeting a week or if it's a standing meeting where you're updating the change, you're likely not changing anything at all. You're just annoying people with a meeting that could be an email. So no standing meetings, no one messaging, no one-way conversation, and no missing the why on why you're changing what you're changing. And to go back to the point I ended on last time, like I enjoy when company leaders don't present solutions to their team, even if they have the solution ready to go, but instead bring the problem set to their team and like live in the problem, discuss what's wrong with us continuing to go down the path that we're going right now. It helps the rest of the company feel the pain that leader must be feeling if they're trying to change something in the first place. And then once you have like a clearly articulated, agreed on problem set or issue that needs solving or change that needs changing, then you can provide like a solution set or an opportunity to solve the thing. And people would have way more buy-in to listening to it if they really understood the problem.
Yeah, it's like alignment and change have way more in common than we think. Because if there's not organizational alignment around whatever it is that you want to do, and so we'll paint every possible angle here. If you're a salesperson and you're trying to work with a champion or it's top down with a CEO to sell into them, whether you're selling software, you're selling a roof, whatever you're selling, there needs to be alignment on the other side of that sale in order for them to do change. So agreement to change is a first step in my mind. Gaining that commitment that it needs to be done. And so
Yeah.
Alignment is almost it feels more tangible than just saying how do we decide that we should change as a company, or how do we convince someone else of this on the other side of a conversation.
Right. The downside of a lot of change too is like it's not super measurable, and you even have to like challenge alignment, right? One of the first questions I ask any company, here's a day in my life. Somebody reads the book They Ask You Answer, and then they want to talk to Impact about They Ask You Answer. And that person is usually holding the book saying, I just read the thing. I totally makes sense to me. I get it all. I buy into it all. I'm ready to do it. And then I say, okay, that's great. It's a good starting point. But let me ask you a question for your business. What does it mean to do They Ask You Answer? And I get a different answer to that question every single time I ask it, because their alignment of the I get it, it makes sense to me, their impression of what that means is totally different. And I wrote this in an article where like people's understanding of what it means to do they ask you answer ranges from like super tactical work to like strategic, and then all the way to like a cultural change within their company. And so like a tactical answer of like, what does it mean for you to do they ask you answer? Someone that I know I don't want to work with is they go, well, we just write a bunch of blogs and then we get traffic to our website. And like, then I'm doing they ask you answer. I totally get it. Versus like a strategic answer, which is, well, now we're obsessing over our customers' questions and giving them the information that they want. It's like, it's a little closer. But then when I ask someone, like, what does it mean for you to do they ask you answer? And I get like a cultural answer. It's like, we're choosing to become the most trusted voices in our space by openly addressing any question or concern any party has. Our customers, our employees, our vendors, we're willing to talk about it all. And that's way different than the first answer I got, even though all three of those people tell me they get it and they're ready to do the thing. So to circle back to like your initial point, Nick, I would always challenge alignment, especially if you're doing something that's going to be immeasurable or not numbers driven, like they ask you answer is. And so you need to discuss like, okay, what does this look like when it's going well in a year? What does failure look like on this? Do we all agree that we're like picturing the same outcomes when we're talking about going and making this change happen? Because if you don't define the end state on something that's as nebulous as doing they ask you answer or whatever change your company's trying to take on, everyone's just going to have a feeling like it's working and have a feeling that we have alignment on finish, but nothing's going to be defined and it's not going to be able to be measured, like what's actually happened in our effort.
Yeah, we love principles around here. And so everything for me kind of comes back to those types of things. And it revolves around this idea of like a shared set of foundational beliefs. And if the belief isn't shared across the board, and not like the executive board, like across the company or across the
Yeah.
teams that matter to this change we're trying to create. So again, if you're on the sales side of things, or if you're on the internal side of things, trying to advocate for something you believe is meaningful to change within the company, whether it's the way you market or the way that you sell or the way that you service or the way that you support a business, gaining alignment on that foundational, those shared beliefs is basically the principle here, and it applies to all of those different situations. So in your example, it's like, do we agree that the way people buy has changed? And if we don't agree on that, we can't really move forward, right? Do we agree that we need to be transparent and honest in everything that we create and publish, right? Like these are all business level strategy things. This doesn't fall on just marketing or just sales. Leadership leads the charge, as they do with everything. That's the point of the job. But without alignment on those on that foundation, it's tough to move anything forward.
Yeah. And even to like define why we're doing something without the beliefs. That's a question I ask leadership is like, okay, when you start to implement, they ask you answer within your company, how are you going to make this a cultural level change within your organization? What does that look like? Like, how do you embed this into just how you operate your business? And usually I get crickets when I have that question asked. And then I'll go to a belief exercise similar to what you just shared, Nick. Like, what do you believe to know that these changes have to be made within your company? And that's when you can at least avoid someone saying like, we believe traffic leads and sales comes from us writing BuzzFeed articles. But instead you get people to say like, we believe our company needs to focus only on being the most trusted voice in our space. And we do that through the exercise of content creation and obsessing over customers' questions. Like it kind of puts the parameters up to make sure that you're coming from a purpose-driven place and also a place that like psychological beliefs people resonate with a lot more than like a new revenue target or a new stretch goal for a company operating better. If you give a belief statement that's pretty difficult to argue with, it'll be difficult to argue with the fact that this is something that needs to happen within your company. So to say that back, like defining your company's problem, like the need for change is step one. And then stating what you believe in that would be true if that change was made is likely step 2 of helping people like understand your why or your purpose for this change.
A lot of people focus so much on the tactics, and you touched on this earlier. It's like the if the change that you're trying to create revolves around doing things different in a tactical way first, it probably won't be either a lasting change or create a meaningful change. So I'll give you a couple examples, right? I was a HubSpot trainer for a few years here, and one of the things was a lot of people come to me and say, "We just bought HubSpot. Like, you need to teach me how to click in HubSpot." It's like, well, you could learn how to click in HubSpot uh, on YouTube. The question is like, are we going to change the way that we operate as a company to adopt a piece of software? Is sales going to use the CRM? And are we going to choose to communicate with our audience through whatever automation tools and like use these business systems? So it's different than just being able to click in a tool. And if there's no agreement there, then things like that don't work. So they come from that tactical first place. One of the things you said is like people come to us and say, "Hey, if I can just blog 3 times a week, I can create this change in my company." It's like, well, yeah, but you can learn how to blog 3 times a week, or you can just do that. There's a million different ways to be able to do that. You don't need this framework to be able to do something like that. And so coming from those 2 different places and is where I see the wheels fall off the bus real early in a lot of these programs.
Yeah. Is it easy, Nick, for you to articulate what like the mindset of your least favorite HubSpot client was versus the mindset of your most favorite HubSpot client when you were training them?
There's a sense of just get it done and expecting instant change. Compared to, we understand that things that are meaningful take time. We can't just automatically dump everything in here and expect it to work. Especially like my favorite line from when I was teaching HubSpot was, "We just want to get the low hanging fruit." And I was like,
Yeah.
there is no low hanging fruit button inside of HubSpot. I'm still waiting for that. I've put in the product requests multiple times. They tell me it's coming. But in all seriousness, like those are the types of things like, "Hey, we just want to hit the low hanging fruit." And you're like, there's no such thing. You can learn how to click all the buttons, but if you don't have a practical use case, or if you can't click publish on a landing page, then learning how to build one isn't going to help you, because you don't have the other things that are in place for that to even be meaningful, right? You can write 3 articles a week all you want, but if they just sit in Google Drive, it's a meaningless change.
Right. Yeah. So takeaway there is quick change generally is too good to be true. And 99% of the time is not something that's lasting. To the point about the ask and answer, someone can read that book in about 6 hours if they're listening on speed read mode on Audible.
Marcus talks pretty quick.
Yeah. And you can speed them up. Lucky you. You can walk away from that going, okay, I need someone to own content in my company. They're going to write 3 articles a week. We're going to have a learning center, not a blog. And then our sales team is going to meet with our marketing team. And that's the ask you answer. Like, it's me cherry picking my favorite 5 tactics that I'm just like, here's a new meeting for my company. We're going to run with this for the summer, and then I'm going to find a new book. And we're going to have new tactics. And we're going to like constantly refresh all of the things that we're doing. And gosh, like that must be so tiring for anyone else in your organization. For those of you that know someone that likes to pick up a new book and then try and have everyone buy into that book, and 3 months later we're on to the next thing. There's nothing lasting that's happening there. That person just feels really busy and probably feels pretty good about how much work they're getting done. But in reality, like there's no lasting change. It's just a bunch of like feel good tactical things that never last more than a few months before we're on to the next feel good tactical thing. Which is why I generally tell people, like, before you want to take on a book like this, especially the ask you answer, and I tie HubSpot into this too, actually. Before you commit to something that long term, you need to go beyond the tactics. Otherwise, you're going to fail. Like, you would be better doing nothing right now than doing this for 3 months. And That's kind of the energy like a leadership team needs before they're actually going to go message this to their company the right way, and then commit to like the 12 plus months it takes for something to be so ingrained in your company. It's just a part of the DNA of how you operate.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cultural damage that's done when a company has those kinds of false starts. So a few weeks back, we had Chris from EW Motion on, and one of the things that he shared was how many times the leadership team, right? So top down initiatives. Here's this new book. Here's this new system. We're going to run this play. And after that happens a few times and they go nowhere, like the change doesn't take, then you have a lot of people working for your company going, flavor of the week. We'll see you soon. Like, we'll be here when the next one comes. Like that type of attitude, and that damages morale. That damages culture. There's a lot of negative internal things that come from a lot of false starts like that. When change can't take place, especially when people come when it comes from top down, like there might be this impression that the middle out type of thing, because those frontline employees are exposed to so many more things, or like they might be reading more things and they might feel that they can present more things. But when it comes from leadership and they're presenting things over and over and over again and nothing takes, that does a lot more lasting damage to the morale of the company, and the team to want to even participate in those types of things, because they know that if they can just brush it off long enough, then you're just going to forget about it or give up. It's not going to be, doesn't matter. And that was something
Yeah.
that Chris articulated, that when they started doing this, they said, we're going to take this one serious, and we're going to make this one part of like the DNA of their company. They went so far as that they changed their mission statement. They went so far as that they wrote the purpose of their company on the walls inside the company. They did a whole bunch of different things, more than just kind of like some of those vanity things, but it's like the way that they hire and the way that they train and the way they onboard patients and clients has changed due to that. And so we're going to live, eat,
Right.
and breathe this as a company.
Yeah. It's leadership saying 100 different ways, like, this isn't going away. We also believe in it ourselves. Here's what we're doing to improve the thing. And yeah, to your point, like, bad communication from a leadership team causes more problems than doing nothing at all. Like, in your worst case scenario, people start stopping believing in the leadership of the leadership team if they can't get the company to change in the way that they want it, or don't stand by their decisions a few months down the road. I was working with a team that had to end up blocking the first 4 hours of Monday mornings to just talk about the Ask You Answer, because it had gone on for 3 months without having anybody take anything from the sales team and start utilizing it themselves. And so what they started doing is just every hour, every week that nothing happened, they added another 30 minutes onto this calendar invite to have more time to talk about why nothing happened. And it was brutal at the end of these meetings. It was like 4 hours of them finally like having nothing to do other than figure out how to get started. And I wouldn't say that's like the ideal setup of getting going, but man, it worked for that team, because they even though it was more micromanaging and it was more like mandatory and not like, let's all get behind the vision, it was them seeing their leadership saying like, we're not budging from this being the vision of where we're headed as a company. And I totally commend them for that. They found the one way that it was going to work for their team.
Typically, forced 4-hour meetings is not the way to go. I think one of the things that we typically lean into is this concept of self-discovery. And we've talked a ton about how this applies, especially in sales conversations. In other words, we use other words to say, show them the mirror and why something that you want to do is so valuable, right? If you're in a sales position, you would know it as creating the gap or quantifying the gap, and being able to articulate what happens if we don't do this, showing them the meaning and showing them the behaviors that they exhibit in themselves and why this thing does apply to us. So What's a principle of self-discovery that you think would is a good place to start, especially for the middle out people? I think that's going to be probably the most common one. Because when you try to say, if you're the director of marketing, you're a marketing manager, or you're an account executive, and you want to go to your director or your VP, or your CRO or something, they'll listen to you if you say something. But how do you bring it to someone in a really meaningful way that they'll want to listen and they'll want to be really engaged in that?
So when we're taught to quantify the gap, um, what this really means is we need somebody to understand current state and future state contrasted from each other. And when you're trying to get anybody to make any change, generally speaking, they need to feel enough pain or motivation to have that change take place. Um, I hear the analogy a lot of like someone can have a sales problem as if it were like a headache for themselves, and they'll want to like take Advil, but they don't want to go to the doctor's office for that headache. They need someone to sit down with them to help them see how the headache is like chronic and that it's never going to hurt so much in one day that you just drop everything and go into the doctor's office. But you need to see like where you're headed on the trajectory of that headache to get that person to raise their hand and say like, okay, I gotta go see a doctor. Um, I share that because like the middle out folks have a responsibility of making their leadership team never feel like any one day is a real problem, but the trajectory of where their company is headed is something that warrants change. And so step one of that is helping them see what current state is and where current state is bringing their company or their team or just the trajectory of the culture, and then show them why that's a problem. And before they are ever ready for like a solution or a book or anything like that, they have to go, we are doing things in an unsustainable way right now. And if we don't change something, we're on track for failure. And if you can't get there, then you have to stop. Like nothing else matters if you can't make that happen. There was this phrase I share with leadership teams when they're trying to introduce this to their sales team. They say we really have like 1 month of what I call the wet cement stage, when we're making change happen within the company. There's like a new meeting on the weekly agenda, and the sales team is sitting there going, I wonder what all this is about. I wonder how long it's going to stick around for. I wonder what it means to me at an individual level. I wonder what I'm going to be responsible for walking away from this meeting. Like all of those things are big open question marks in the wet cement stage. And then you have like a month go by, and people don't really consciously do this, but they get to the point of being like, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what content means to me, or what this change means to me, I'm going to be responsible for at an individual level on a weekly basis. If this is worth my time, or if it's worth minimizing, if it's going to make me more money, or if it's a waste of time, if this is going to put me out of a job, like all of those things people usually know within a month. And that's what we call like the dry cement phase. It's very difficult to change a sales team, or change anybody for that matter, once the cement is dried. And you get wet cement when you go like define a new problem and you say, we need to go solve this together. And then you have like a month to roll it out before everyone has a good feeling of what they think this means to them at an individual level. And it becomes way harder to change after that cement is dried. You tracking with me, Nick?
Yeah. The cement one's a good analogy. I have one that is similar to your aspirin one, which is
Okay.
you can live without taking your vitamins, but if you don't if you need an aspirin and you don't take one, like you're gonna know it. And like there's a very different feeling that you get when you need one compared to like you don't need your vitamins. You should take them. And if you're positioning things as vitamins and not aspirin, like the type of change that you want to see in the company, or the type of change that you're advocating for in this as a salesperson, talking to a prospect, people invest in aspirin. They don't invest in vitamins. And whether that's like an internal investment in your own team and whatever it may be, or in a product or service or solution, and you're going to spend some money on it with a third party. And so Marcus gave this example once a while back, and I thought it really stuck with me, which was like, for a middle out change, if someone comes to your VP of marketing, it's like, we need to put pricing on the website, they're going to be like, thanks. Right? These are vitamins. If someone says, "Hey, I read this book and it really opened my eyes to a lot of different things," or "Hey, I discovered this information. It really opened my eyes to a lot of different things that I think we could do that could solve one or two major internal problems." Right? It can solve our conversion rate issue. It can solve our pipeline velocity X, Y, or Z that we're trying to achieve here. Could you take the time to look through this book or watch this thing, right? Like insert whatever it is that you're trying to get someone to take the first step on. And in his example, he said, could you read this book? Can you take the, could you do this thing so that we could talk about it? That is a moment of put someone in a reflective state and not a reflexive state, because now they're not going to immediately jump on that conversation and say, no, we don't have time for that, or no, we don't have the money for that, or no, we're like, that's not really part of our plan, right? And you're taking the aspirin lens because you're talking about pain that we're currently suffering from as a company. And that little bit of a change in the delivery prompts that mode of self-discovery where someone is going to consume the information in the reflexive mode. They're going to consume it with an open mind because you also prompted to say, I'd like you to do this so that we can talk about it. Not so that we can put pricing on our website, but so that we can talk about it and see if there's something we can do, something we can learn from this to create a positive change in our company.
Yeah. Imagine like what has to be true for that person to say no to that request then.
Exactly.
They have to either like somehow dispute like, hey, the headache that you're presenting to me is not actually a headache for us, which if you know who you're talking to, you likely know the headaches and the real problems. And second off, they would just have to tell you like, I'm too busy to go solve this right now, or it's not an important priority for us. And I think in either case, this is just not going to happen.
Well, it's on us to also have our finger on the pulse of the true problems of the business. I mean, if you want to do something that is completely unrelated to anything that is going on in your business, I think you're gonna have a hard time creating change. If you're like, hey, we should really throw pizza parties every Wednesday, and it's not, and there's no business case for pizza parties every Wednesday, it's not gonna. They're gonna be like, all right, great, maybe we'll carve out some budget. Thanks, Will. But if you're saying, hey, I think I've looked through the numbers based on our pipeline velocity of the trailing 3 quarters, like this seems to be a problem. There's two, and it comes down to, in my opinion, our average sale price and our close rate. Here's something that I think could help us start to address that. Could you check this out? And I would like to talk with you about it and see if there's something that we can do to start addressing that. And you're like, wow, this person really did their due diligence here. Right. And that applies, I think that applies to any type of internal advocate. So if you're the champion and you're saying, hey, I really want us to buy HubSpot, I can see how HubSpot could really benefit my business. So whether you're selling SaaS or you're selling whatever, I can see that. Well, how do you, right? This is also where you would work with a salesperson too, right? Like on the other end, you're saying, hey, we need to advocate to create change inside of this company. How would we do that? And one of the things that people expect is some sort of instant allocation of funds and instant acceptance of the pain and all of these other things.
Yeah, that's what we train salespeople to like, as soon as you get that acceptance from your first person you're talking to of like what their problem is and that they know they need to solve it, you like get in the boat with them and say like, okay, I'm on your team now. And now it's up to both of us to go help the rest of the company realize what you realized when we were having this conversation today. Like, let's go help the rest of your team see the headache that you guys have here and what the gap could be if we solve this thing. I like your like the numbers that you put behind it too. 90% of the time, I'm helping somebody get excited about improving their close rate, or improving their average amount of leads that get into their pipeline, or improving their average time to close if they're a long, slow sale. And those are usually the things that you could get any leadership to say, yeah, these are not as high as they could be, or aren't performing as well as they could be right now. And it's worth our time to go solve these things or try to impact change around them.
Yeah, there's so many different angles here, and I think we're blending a lot of them together just kind of for the sake of the larger conversation on this one. But there's ways that there's just to kind of like zoom out a bit here and touch on all of them real quick, which is there's the way that you do this if you're selling into a company, or the ways that it applies and the principles that apply if you're selling into a company. There's the ways that it apply that if you are the champion, kind of that middle out person trying to create change in your company. And then there's the ways that you communicate and deal with this if you're top down in the leadership seat, trying to make sure that the thing that you do doesn't gets perceived properly and is actually implemented and taken seriously. And the principles tend to apply across the board, and it's some things that we've talked about basically every single episode, which is the role that things like content play in creating change. You know, I mentioned it earlier, like in the beginning of the episode, but there's something that had to happen inside of you to come to a conclusion. And typically takes a decent amount of time. And it's you're consuming content like over a long period of time, and it slowly changes the way that you think. And you slowly build trust with whomever's creating that content. That helps solidify and kind of hardwire the way that you're thinking in that moment. And it's expecting the person on the other end that you're so fired up and you're like, your light bulb is shining bright. And you're like, I got this. And they don't receive it. And like that is a moment that is such a critical moment of where content plays a part and how you can use content to share that point of view and to be able to share why these things are meaningful. And typically we bypass the content part as people who are trying to advocate for things, and we go straight into like, I can just explain it. And I think salespeople will relate with this one. When the champion tries to explain the thing to their boss or their decision maker and everything starts to fall apart, very similar thing. It's probably the exact same thing. So the role content plays in doing this is absolutely huge. That's why most people tell us the first thing that they did when they wanted to take the Ask You Answer seriously was they made the entire company read the book. Or they ran a book club. Someone told me the other day, they said, I ran a book club. My CEO found the book. He ran a book club and we followed, and we took 45 days to read the book as a company or whatever the thing is. So however that applies in someone else's specific situation.
Yeah. My big takeaway from what you just shared, because I think I'm guilty of this all the time, is people generally overestimate their ability to convey clear, concise communication and then to get people to buy into what they believe in. Couple funny facts. One is 80% of people think they're above average at being perceptive of like people's true intentions, which is just fundamentally impossible that 80% of people can be above average at something. And then no one likes to be sold to. And there's kind of, to your point, Nick, like when you're trying to convey a message to someone or get them to believe what you believe, I know it doesn't sound like a slimy sales pitch, but there's some level of selling going on. And we've all felt this before. Like you're almost aversion to when you're knowing that you're being sold to. If you know you're being sold something, you usually totally back off because you don't want to have the wool pulled over your eyes, or you don't want want that salesperson to win in their ultimate goal. Sometimes
that's the reflective thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. And people can have that same thinking when not even that they're being sold a product or a service, but they're just being sold like an idea. They're sitting there going like, man, what's in it for you right now? Like, why do you care to get my brain wrapped around this change or this idea? And if you can articulate that like in a very clear and transparent way, then you're starting at the wrong point. So to bring this back to self-discovery, like I like what Michael said. We start with, is this a problem for our company? Yes or no? And then do we believe these things about our company? And are we willing to change? Like, is this something that we're all willing to take on, or is now not the right time? And if so, when is the right time? Those are like all fodder for really valuable conversation that doesn't allow anybody to become reflexive or like defensive even, and instead just allows people to be introspective and live in the problem and have it be like a group thing rather than one person trying to sell everyone an idea that's stuck in their head.
Yeah, the nuances of triggering self-discovery and triggering the reflect is there's definitely an art to it, and I think we went through a few different like techniques and like kind of some talk tracks, but salespeople are very good at triggering this inside of people. Um, but it's definitely something to continue to work on, especially as you're trying to gain consensus for something. Michael had a good question. Well, I think this one's good for you. So I like the concept of agreeing on a shared set of foundational beliefs, talking about a situation or a market, thinking we should discuss our foundational beliefs on the website or the blog for everyone to see. Do you agree?
Yes and no. So I think like foundational beliefs of a company, that's kind of the claims we make video, if you're familiar with that. This is like what usually sits on an About Us video or an About Us page of somebody's website. It's like all of the beliefs they have or all of the differentiators they think they are of like, why insert this company? And usually it's just a bunch of claims that 80% of the people in the industry are saying, and then it almost becomes noise. And so the whole point of a claims we make video is us showing us making or showing us doing the things that we're claiming and not just claiming the things that we're making. I think to your point, Michael, like it would be fair to say the principles of what you believe your learning center is supposed to be on the homepage of your learning center. So if your space is in insurance, you can sit there and say, we believe everybody deserves to find the right insurance provider for them. We believe they're not better and worse ones. There's just better and worse fits for certain people. And we believe everyone should have one place to come get all the information they need to find the right fit insurance provider for them. And that just happens to be where you are right now on this learning center. And like all of a sudden you're giving the why behind all of the investment you made in building an amazing learning center.
There's absolutely the claims we make option. There's absolutely the learning center option you discussed. I think and this is like the marketing versus sales lens here. I mean, and the line is blurry. But when we think about like foundational beliefs and how do we articulate that on the website, one of the ways that we do it, and you can go through our like service pages and you'll see this, which is we position the beliefs almost backwards as problems. That in the way they manifest themselves and show up inside of a company, so that someone could agree that the problem exists. Marketing problems versus marketing certain solutions. So they live in different places and they show up in different ways. They all point in the same direction, though, and that's one of the most important things is that the problems that you solve and the things that you believe about the world and the way that you operate as a business all must point in the same direction. And it sounds obvious, but if you go through any website, you're going to find a lot of conflicting direction. So we want to make sure that we're leading people in one place to one place. Michael followed up. He said, "IT solutions that enable remote work." So our foundational belief is that the hybrid remote work is here to stay. And to support it, your IT architecture needs to change. Too salesy. Will, what do you think?
Too salesy, Michael.
Your IT infrastructure needs to support the change that is happening in the world. Whether this is the way that this is a belief that I have. The way that we operate as companies and as like employees and as people has changed, and is on the businesses that want to thrive today and into the future to adapt to those changes. Very similar to kind of the point of view and the narrative of this show. Right? It's like these changes have taken place and we are illuminating to you that this change has taken place, whether or not you know it. And the difference is that you can either support it and be a fantastic place to work and support people and attract some of the best talent because your business model supports it, or you can do this other thing and try to find people who can work for you within 30 minutes of your office. This is a total riff and me kind of unpacking some of what I read there, but I think
yeah, I think that was a huge step up already, Nick. I don't know if I could do much better than that. Let me try and riff it though. So I would say we believe the way that people work has changed forever. And we believe it's the employer's responsibility to stay up to speed with the competitive landscape that is the job market. And we also believe that that's a full-time job for an employer just trying to stay up to speed, having their infrastructure of IT needs being up to snuff and world class, which is why we believe companies need a business like ours to open to a job market across the globe, so that you can get the best employees for what your company's purpose is, and something along those lines.
I like it. We can even take it. This is like some category kind of point of view stuff, but we can take it a level further. And one of the things that we can do is include, right? You would want to include a statistic to back up a claim. So if I'm going to make up a thing, 87% of businesses' IT is susceptible to whatever IT security breach problem exists in the world. And you have this, we wouldn't make up a stat, right? We'd have something that's true to support the claim, right? To support the belief. Like, why do we believe this? Where does this belief even come from? Is this just because you believe it, is it actually a problem? So these are the unconscious things that are ripping through someone's head when they read that headline on your website, when they read that H2 on your blog article or something. They're going to make this decision immediately, and they're going to go, this doesn't seem like an actual problem. And they're going to go full reflexive thinking. This doesn't seem like a problem to me, and they're going to dip. Versus prompting something that causes them to reflect.
Well said.
I like it. Elevator pitches on But We're Different. Who knew? We've come so far. All right, well, let's land this plane, man. How to think different. Buy-in, change management, organizational change. Where you at?
If I was in a company, middle or top of the road, and I knew change needed to happen, my first step of making that change happen would be to allow other people in the company to live in the pain of that change not happening with me for a conversation or two, saying, are we okay with this? This is just how it is right now. These are just the facts. Is this a problem? Is this something we solve now? If not now, then when? And have that problem marinate with the team so that everybody gets their own take on it and everybody can feel the headache rather than think about it just taking the vitamins. This isn't proactive solving. This is us solving something that's meaningful for the company, if it is. And then before I had that meeting, I would come ready to have belief statements about the why behind a change taking place here at all. Ideally, like cultural level belief statements. So those deep things of like, do we believe these things as a company? And do we believe we stand for these things? And if so, we should go solve this problem with these beliefs being the outcomes of what is true when the problem is solved. All of that should take place in a room that has a psychologically safe space for anybody to say what they're actually thinking about the problem. And it should include anyone that this change is going to touch, as long as that's like geographically practical. But I think the more people that you incorporate into the problem definition stage and the solution set stage, the faster this change sweeps over a company like yours. Because those people understand the why, they understand the urgency for changing the things, rather than providing someone with just the solution and saying, these things are changing within my company. Those are my big takeaways from this conversation today. And I encourage anybody to say the change they think they need in the organizations that they're a part of, and challenge you to go have the potentially weird or awkward conversation to start making that change in your companies.
Well said, Will. I think the only thing I could possibly add to that is on the alignment front, and that agreeing and aligning on if we all believe these things are true as a company, then we must change, right? Like using the alignment to your advantage to advocate for change or to advocate for solving a problem. Well done, Will. All right, y'all. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. As always, you can catch the replays of these sessions, guest appearances on other great shows, tons of exclusives from the team here at Impact on the But We're Different podcast. If you'd like to bring the principles of the Ask Me Answer to your company, you can never hesitate to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or email, or Will on LinkedIn or email. I will make sure you get what you need to see success. So that's it for But We're Different Live Season 1, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you very, very soon.